Good morning. Happy Friday, LinkedIn friends. Uh, YouTube, maybe you're watching us over there. Maybe it's afternoon. If you're across the pond, welcome to another edition of Let's Build Community Content with Rob Jones. How you doing, man?
Good. It's Friday and I've had coffee, some of it, so I'm still waking up, but I'm here. It's also incredibly cold for whatever reason. It was like 75 earlier in the week and now it's 40. Does not
Yep,
help my
feeling
sinuses
that.
or allergies.
Feeling that for sure. I don't have those side effects, thankfully. But yeah, it's gotten cold in Houston in the morning
Mm.
this week. So the season appears to be here. Um, it's been an interesting week, man. Uh, uh, and we'll just dive right in because I don't think we got to be direct when it comes to this conversation we're about to have. And um, uh, let me share my screen real quick just to really, put it in perspective.
Share it,
That would
babe.
be
Share it.
great because our community's struggling, man. Um, Struggling with identity. Uh, Kevin Van Beers makes a post
I saw this.
yesterday, right? And something that's been on my mind, like, developing community, developing uh, new ways to help people get better in the ecosystem by sharing their knowledge, doing community content better, all this stuff we've been talking about. Uh, Kevin lists all these job titles, uh, doesn't even include RevOps, um, and then basically talks about how confusing this is. And I think usually, as our friend, not personal friend, I just like him as a human being, Donald Miller, of Story Brand, like if you confuse, you lose. We're losing trust right now because it's really hard to tell what the hell these mean, like what this person can do to help me. And I was thinking, I hot like a interesting question for you. When you look at this list and see if you can go with your gut here, what is the most confusing word that you see in the list?
Me?
Yeah,
HubSpot.
bam, there it is.
Yep.
I agree, man. Um, it's a
Why
challenge.
though?
What does HubSpot mean,
Yeah.
right? Like, and like this is where we talk about this. We talk about the positive aspects of being a an engaged ecosystem, like trying to adhere to a value first ideal. Uh, but there's also some other impacts, like what we're talking about, where if you look at any of these words without the word HubSpot next to them in maybe some other ecosystems, it can be very clear in those ecosystems, not necessarily a Salesforce ecosystem. I know there's similar problems over there, but there are infrastructures and communities that have done this very, very well and have structured titling um, and it's not as challenging. It's not as confusing. But when you put the word HubSpot next to them right now, it's in this ecosystem, we're struggling to find our footing on this stuff, man.
Find a footing of understanding or like a place that makes sense or a terminology standardization that shows levels of like experience or depth of knowledge or any of that.
I think all of the above. Uh,
I mean, I think it's a good problem, right? 3 years ago, I would say like this is confusing, but it's confusing on a very positive, like magnanimous level. 3 years ago, HubSpot, like what titles would have been after this? Marketing ops leader, HubSpot enthusiast. HubSpot employee, like that kind of stuff. So it's a testament to the product team, like Yamini's leadership. The it's a testament to them that this confusion is here. It sounds probably weird, but a couple years, hell, 2 years ago, some of these titles would not have been taken seriously, or I would say even if they did exist, wouldn't have been taken seriously. Like HubSpot architect, yeah, what do you do? Like, so I think getting through like the word salad and abbreviations of some of this stuff is the key to your point of like where's the hierarchy, what does this actually mean, and what does that look like when it's deployed. And goes on in that post to say that's not even mentioning RevOps. Think about how much more confusing it is if you add that in there without standardization of what that means.
Yeah. And I was having a discussion about this week with somebody that suggested RevOps and marketing ops were basically the same. And I said, you just pissed a lot of people off probably if you were to tell them that. But it again, it speaks to the problem, and we're not even talking about HubSpot admin that's on this list. Uh, and almost like you can get a sense for the heart of the problem if you look at HubSpot admin job descriptions that are out there. Like if you see 10 job postings, you will get 10 different job descriptions for admins. So I kind of agree. Look, some of the comments talk about uh, we can't solve it. So let's just focus on showing up and doing good work. Um, I can't get on board with that, man, because at some point we are interacting with each other in these places, and we've got to find a way to build trust. And if I don't understand, or I get confused, or I don't trust any of the labels that are next to your name, I don't even give you a chance to show up and do good work. Uh, so like finding these, like last week we talked about like positioning from an organizational perspective. Like we have to find a way to say, before you talk to me, before you interact with me directly, you have some idea of the help you can get from me, what kind of value you can get. And I'm not saying title is everything. And I'll say from a job title perspective, I don't think we can solve it because that is very organizational specific. Leaders are going to make titles. Like titles are very internal in terms of helping other people in your organization understand what you do. But that doesn't mean we can't create some identity and some classifications around skill sets required to do the job.
Yes, you're talking to somebody whose legitimate job title for about 2 weeks was commissioner of content at Rev Partners. So yeah, I my take on that is like it doesn't really matter. But it matters internally. I agree with that. Like the nomenclature and how within the org titles and roles and whatnot. Even there's a lot that goes into that with like promotions, all of the people ops stuff. So I understand the need for it, but it doesn't mean that accurately reflects what it is that you as an individual offer. It doesn't reflect any of that necessarily because you're contrasting it to your point in the market with people that are. The funnier example of this is anybody in, to me, insurance or real estate. My wife does insurance, but it's like Chris Carolyn, FNP, CCI, like the 50 things at the end. Would you think that's less confusing? Like if you were in the industry, would you think that's less confusing or more confusing? I would say that's a better indicator of like what the officially recognized accreditations or um, like depth of experience, right? Like if you were Chris Carolyn, PhD, which you probably are, uh,
No, definitely
that
not.
gives a lot of clarity, right? Because that's standardized. It means at the very least you've done what 4 years, 5 years of work. You've defended your dissertation, all that. So it gives some credibility right away. much more so than the way it's structured now. Even with like badges and tiers and all that, and that helps a lot. But getting more into like the RevOps and delivery problem is like, okay, you have these badges and accreditations, but do you have them in manufacturing or in um, like industry specific areas, or do you have them in this one specific thing that I need help with? That's to me like the next step in hierarchy of skill as far as it is like presented outwardly.
Right. Yeah.
That was a lot of
Well, that's just so much comes to mind. I mean, I think the one thing I'd love to align on with the community is that there is work to be done here, and it needs to be done. Like this is not a problem that's just going to solve itself. Um, because even as you as you mentioned, like PhD, like certainly can offer up credibility and clarity in certain situations. But I remember when I was on the inside of companies, and it's like, okay, just because somebody has a Northwestern, marketing, degree, they're automatically better than this other candidate. Uh, when in reality, you could just see work being done or how people show up. To Matt's point, the comment that he made was we do need to show up with the work, with the value, but we got to tie that to something. And it's not always, and I'd say like education credentials aren't what they used to be. We talk a lot about coming out of university. You might have a piece of paper, but how much practical skill do you have because you haven't had any experience um, in when you mention manufacturing, things like Lean Six Sigma come to mind,
yep.
right? And I think with things like what Winning by Design is doing, um, and starting to certify on that kind of stuff, like we'll get there. But right now, it's uphill because we have an academy that has certifications in it, and let's be honest, they don't often mean a whole lot, right? It can help you from a base knowledge and understanding theory wise, but the ability to apply that information in this growing customer platform, it's just you can't count on that. And when people like when we grow out of or when we grow up from this place where it was like it's still the same community where we want to help each other grow and we want to be proud of things we're doing to help ourselves grow and help each other grow, and the HubSpot Academy will always be a symbol of that. So we want to support people sharing their certifications. We also don't want to conflate that with real world experience in specific verticals and specific markets that we're seeing a big gap in, and it's very hard to find the help that you need in some cases. So how do we bridge that gap?
I mean, I know. I think it's hard. I mean, I love all everything about HubSpot Academy. Like, is it? Do I think they've like net hurt or helped the ecosystem? Like that's not even a question, right? Like
Oh no,
100%,
definitely not.
it's legit. It's been massively like that. That's beyond to me discussion or reproach of them, even with how it's structured. But there's a game here. I'm gonna launch into one of these analogies, right? Do you know who invented basketball or chess or whatever, right? Like when something is invented and developed and updated, we'll take basketball as an example. Was it Naismith? Whoever invented the
Naismith.
game, like was
Yeah.
never. He's not. as good, or he's not as the game has not only changed, but like it was never the owner doesn't have to be the architect of the product's continued development and growth. And so once like here we built this awesome thing, we'll keep building it. We're not really sure what all you could use it for. So like the verification standards for competency as it's applied to real world cases needs to be a third party. It can't be HubSpot doing that themselves.
Right.
So to me, the natural progression is like a third party or somebody adjacent or close to the partner ecosystem that develops something like Lean Six or like like official either industry certs or accreditations or badges or something like cert, something that denotes experience or mastery. But I don't think it is ever gonna. It's never going to be as legitimate or useful having come from HubSpot themselves as the creators of the software because the problem sets now HubSpot themselves would say it's all what is it all in one versus all on one, like it's all through HubSpot. They didn't build, how many app integrations are there now? Over 1500, 2000. So it's
Yeah.
not their job to have expertise in all of those things. But take a partner that has, let's say they have every accreditation, they have uh, all the certs, right? They have all of that stuff, and they become take like field sales management for whatever reason is like a hot topic. It's something I'm seeing a lot. So you take that as a grouping of problem sets and things that you commonly solve for and iterate on that. Like we're certified in field sales management deployment through HubSpot. And it would be those companies, right, or partners to eval how like to rank and figure out the structure so that you can have an accreditation in the first place. Probably not very well worded, but I think the bottom line is it can't HubSpot is not going to be the one I think to show the way of what it looks like for continuing ed past HubSpot Academy. I mean, how is this done in other industries? You have probably really good insight into that because you mentioned Lean Six Sigma and all this coming like a third party inventing. The closest you've gotten is like Winning by Design, like with revenue architecture certification. That's pretty close, but that's not from it's from a another expert in data architecture as it applies to setting up systems. It, to me, that's a better use case of somebody that knows how to implement data architecture within a CRM than HubSpot having a CRM, badge or course.
Yeah. No, it has to be from a third party. Um, Accreditation companies, accreditors, they exist definitely in material science space. Uh, and they're a big part of the space, maybe too much sometimes. Um, but you do need those checks and balances in place. So I think from an accreditation uh, and certification perspective, we're definitely missing that piece right now. And I think Winning by Design is starting to at least because so much of this is has to be based on practical like theory and application and not like which tool you're using, right?
Yep.
Um, so and this is like when you're talking about the whole customer journey, there's a lot of stuff in there. Like Winning by Design, like hits on a couple things um, that can really handle the data layer, very well. Um, but it's when you're bringing this, I guess to answer your original question, when it was real estate and these letters after, like, would anybody know? Like instead of Chris Carolyn PhD, Chris Carolyn whatever the Winning by Design, acronym might be, right? So
Yeah.
I think like either way, we have to introduce something new, a new kind of structure, and we have to do the work to tell the story about why that matters and the education about why that matters. And we can't. tie it to the things that we might want to, like job titles and hubs
Yep.
and stuff inside of HubSpot, right? So what is that?
It's a
What?
mind destroying problem. Like I'm literally thinking about this right now and have been for a while. I've said stuff like this before, but it's before you unseat, you know, Salesforce or Dynamics as like the trust, the most visible, the market share, all of that, you have to first identify the actual problem, which isn't Salesforce versus HubSpot. It's I've joked before. It's a P like our interpret my interpretation of this is PHLG, not PLG. So it's philosophy led growth that HubSpot needs to adopt, which is like at its heart, there's another option. Like just that little, you ever seen Inception, right? Like
Oh yeah,
that's the concept. For 30 years, has that been true? Not really. Like it was Dynamics or Salesforce, like those two, probably Salesforce. All we're saying is there's another option. Okay, cool. So what makes this option better? Now you can get into, well, 65 versus 13 acquisitions. It's all built on the same, like all of the crafted, not cobbled, all of that stuff comes out. But to your point, it still doesn't like it still doesn't solve the overall problem that people are facing whenever they have to move from Salesforce in the first place, or whenever they're stuck here and like what problems are you having in achieving sustainable growth for the business? So how do we solve those? There's like this would be an interesting exercise. I'm gonna say some stuff and you tell me if you agree with it, okay?
yeah,
HubSpot is the fastest growing CRM in the market. Say that's fact.
agreed,
We'll pretend. I mean, I think it's true. GTM efficiency is at an all-time low.
agreed.
Yeah, there are more tools for sales and marketing than there ever have been.
Yes,
The buyer journey is not linear and it's not trackable. Buyers self-educate first, not second.
correct.
Okay. There is little to no ROI from AI yet. Getting trickier to agree with
Incorrect.
all these. We'll hold on that one.
Disagree.
No, well, I mean, like, that's fair. I mean, what if 5 out of 6 at met so far? Most CRM implementations fail. It's right at 50%, probably over.
Correct.
B2B buyers now have B2C expectations.
Correct.
Retention matters more than net new revenue for growth.
Always.
Okay. There's no cohesive RevOps methodology that produces repeatable outcomes. Debatable.
Yeah. I
So, like,
mean,
from all those things, what is the fix or the like boiled down problem statement to address? That's been my face for like 2 weeks. How do you bucket all that into one thing that makes sense to tell a cohesive narrative? That's a lot of good points, or some points better than others, but it's a lot of observations that from which you deduce like if A is true, then B must be true, and so all of this. And it's all the stuff we've talked about today. You said one really weird thing that I think highlights like the need for a methodology that works, and that's you said like I forgot who said this, but yeah, marketing ops and rev ops are basically the same thing. I wouldn't disagree with that on a contextual basis. People have come to us, and we have people that say, yeah, I mean, we reached out and we're partners or whatnot because it was a marketing issue. But what's been revealed there is our understanding of what RevOps was incorrect. For us right now, it's a revenue problem that is primarily centered around marketing issues that we're having. But that was just our interpretation of it. So is RevOps only marketing ops? It can be. It shades towards whatever issue people are having per engagement, but that's still not the definition of what RevOps intent is. Can it be more marketing ops than sales ops? Sure. Can it be more like customer service or sure. Can it be more on um, the actual product and probably
Right.
sure? Can it be culture related? Can it be some like hierarchy or organizational? Sure. Does RevOps touch that now with so that's kind of what we're trying to do is standardize the definition. It's just hard for people to adopt that. It's hard to proliferate the standardization of a word or terminology if you're not Merriam-Webster or you're not, it's not your job if you haven't been appointed to do that. Winning by design, I think, is the closest. Um, and thus, to me, we're the closest because we built a lot of stuff kind of from that. But it's still not prolific enough for everybody to like digest and say, "Oh, that makes sense. I agree." Or
All right. And that's the work to be done, right? Like, and that's so when I say like we have to get rid of some old terminology, it's like we can't continue to complain. And this is not just in the software space. This happens in the spaces I'm from too. We complain about outcomes that the old organizational structure creates. But then we continue to want to talk in silos, marketing, sales. Like the re- the the things that you described for RevOps are the reason it is not marketing ops, because marketing ops cannot do those things. And when you come in as a marketing ops professional, you are automatically setting expectations. Now, so the challenge is there. What the hell does RevOps mean? That's the challenge. Like nobody knows that in a lot of spaces. Um, and we got Cameron calling in here. So I'd love to bring him in and just see if I can do this for the first
oh,
time
he's gonna
ever in
come in here hot.
Riverside.
He'll come in here angry. Don't let him in.
Here he
I'm gonna
is.
give you guys a two
How you doing,
minute
Cameron?
drop, and then I'm gonna leave you to talk about it.
Okay.
But to your point, RevOps addresses the entire flow of revenue throughout the organization. By definition, anything else is marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops. And depending on the size and scale of the company, you might have an organization that is focused on sales ops or marketing ops, and maybe they think that's revenue operations. I think one of the challenges that a lot of the people in our ecosystem are facing right now is HubSpot previously was in the SMB space. So RevOps to a very small organization can be focused on marketing for a very long time, and it can look like RevOps, even though it's a very, very niche area of the business. The reality is, as we move enterprise level, that becomes a much more distinct set of skills. To be able to work for an enterprise level company and truly do RevOps, you truly are addressing all areas of the business. And so ultimately, RevOps is very different from marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops, and they all can function together and they all can work together and coexist, but they're very different roles and very different skill sets, especially as you move enterprise. My hot take.
I agree.
Agreed. Agreed.
Did you come in here just to say this and then hop out?
That's it.
Man,
I
you're not
don't
gonna
want to
stay
be
around?
too talked anymore. That's it.
All right. Appreciate it, Cameron.
Thanks, Cam.
I mean, he nails it. And that's why I think like we have to get out of this game of basing what we're talking about on organizational, infrastructure and functionality. And like, how do we do that? I think there's a lot to be said for, because it does come back to identity. Like, who am I as somebody that can help you with HubSpot? Also, me knowing you as somebody who can help me with HubSpot. Like, you start throwing around these terms. At the end of the day, there's always some term to be had, but the more it gets into like these combination of acronyms and MOPS, SOPs, and RevOps, and you just have an inherently harder problem to deal with. So, is there a way to kind of separate from job function and maybe specific like tool-based skills, right? Or execution tactical based skills, and switch to like, how do you show up in the conversation? What kind of things are going to give you energy as we work together? Um, because what comes to mind, and I mentioned this, I think this morning in a comment, like the problems that we have in the ecosystem. Uh, I mean, I think it gets a lot easier to start to solve this problem if we come from a place of there is a trust problem in the market, in this ecosystem specifically. Nobody has any idea who exactly can help them, largely because of all these confusing words and what not knowing what HubSpot can do for me in my business. Uh, it's very easy to find misinformation out there, old information, and people that will champion that old information with the same titles as the person, you know, next to them. Meanwhile, most of the people I talk to agree that largely this being an awareness problem. We have Kyle Jepson showing up every day for years, focused on sharing product updates, news, knowledge about HubSpot. I haven't had anybody deny the fact that we need 10 more Kyles, like from HubSpot themselves. And we could use 100 more people like him outside of HubSpot, sharing knowledge about industry specific applications, you know, job specific applications, like taking it and making it practical. Kyle can do that because that's his job.
Yep.
He's a correspondent basically for HubSpot, and he doesn't have to build and he doesn't have to coach. I'm sure he does a fair bit of coaching and consulting as people come up and ask questions, but it's not a part of his role, right? His main role is to share and create awareness, right? And it's a very important function that is missing from the ecosystem
Let me
right
just
now.
blow your mind right real quick because he said this to me. Kyle is one of the most down to earth, great, human beings ever, and he has himself said, I think we've mentioned this before, is like his job is not to have practical, like hands-on experience necessarily, because he gets the beta features and and figures out use cases. But a lot of the stuff that he's commented on and been able to say like, wow, how many times have you seen Kyle Jepson comment on somebody's post or workflow or use case and been like, I never would have thought to do that. That's because it trust, yes, all of that industry, yes, but to me, you've got to like bucket and go really, really wide before you start going deeper. So go back to RevOps. Like to me, there's 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 there might not be one like definition or a structured definition that's understood, and I think that's part of it. Like there's almost three pillars or like core functions, right? Which is visibility, efficiency. Ops is like efficiency, visibility, and data, and then like helping increase the validity or viability of the source of truth. So there's three parts of like what RevOps, and you can apply that to sales ops, marketing, like up when it comes to revenue, creates efficiency in processes across teams, like reduces friction, that kind of jargon. Um, there's a visibility component that's like, is the data in? Is it accurate? Can we see it? And what do we derive from it? And then like within that, like owning and maintaining the source of truth, HubSpot, the CRM for the company. If that's the case, which I think it is, I think it's closer to a pillared definition than anything else. Then you can start looking at what's the other half of that problem. Like all of this is science. So doing something iteratively and saying if we increase MQLs, then our revenue will increase by what you could be as use whatever example. That is science. That is hypothesis and testing. So the reason Kyle and other people, like the reason Kyle is so like has so much reach and understanding and all this, and other people can figure out better ways to actually implement this and use cases that are practical, is because he's not doing like the controlled explosions. Like there is a very real testing element of this that happens in the market, happens everywhere. And you have to have at bats and real use cases and nuance and context and all of those things to be able to figure out ways to continue iterating and making not only HubSpot better, but its application more effective. So to me, what is what are the two buckets you can almost put everything into? Is it the what happens after? Is it the iteration and the note taking and journaling and creating like a source of truth and data from testing? RevOps to me is that. It's back of house. It's it's chronicling the experiment. To me, it's like a big lab. Like your CRM is a lab. RevOps maintains it, owns it, keeps it hygienic, cleans it, makes everything happen better, and records all of that. The front half of that is like, all right, let's do this again. Is go to market. It's taking all of the insights and data points and kind of like the results and being able to apply strategy to see if new hypotheses, hypothesize, whatever the hell it is, if those work to create the intended effect or not. So once you have those like super high broad level, once you have those two things that are distinguished and their functions, you also know that they work in tandem all of the time. Like it's a perpetual feedback loop of, all right, we're gonna try this, we're gonna put content in this new channel, we're gonna feed it this budget, see what like paid ads, whatever it is, and then RevOps creates the systems for capturing that, makes them better, like diagnoses, gets visibility into the results, and then says, based on this, here's what we should try next time. And go to market, sales, market, brand, whatever, goes and executes those things at the behest of RevOps. Super, super broad. I mean, we can go into that. But if you're trying to separate out like the two, like if you're trying, I guess if you're trying to figure out like the two biggest buckets, to me, that's kind of where to start. And like efficiency and growth is just the outcome of those two core functions of your org working together as well as they can, like as closely, as much visibility, all that as well as they can. Thoughts?
uh, Trying to listen before I just prescribe. Um, but I've been like, when you're in it every day, like it's like we've been hearing about this. This is not new. We've been feeling this for at least a year. At least ever since I became a partner, like immediately this was apparent, this disconnect. And when these layers are just missing completely, like a strategy layer, like of the ecosystem, should you be building the workflow? Like, should you add this property? Like, should you build this custom object? That question is hardly ever asked in most relationships related to what can or cannot be done with HubSpot, how it's supposed to work for my business, because there's a very functional approach to success with HubSpot. There has been. It's like we talk about quick wins, onboarding checklists, like how do we get the emails out, right? Very tactical. And then, so it's hard for me to not address and not be really intentional about creating space for these layers that have never existed, because I know like right out of the gate people aren't going to understand, like there's nothing to tie it to, because it hasn't existed. And so what you find is I'm gonna say three buckets. Let's say Craftsman, which happened to work well with Crafted Not Cobbled. uh, coach, and correspondent, right? And because of the growth metric, or because of the growth trajectory and where we've come from, and this switch from marketing ops, marketing leadership, marketing teams being the primary users of the system, and then RevOps comes in, right? It's all builders. Like they all got to build stuff in HubSpot. But knowing that that's enough, you can't just solution, right? The best builders are asking the questions. Should we do this? What is the goal? Things like that. They're also there saying, oh, this new product update just came out. Here you go. Like, and my point in creating these buckets is that if I can, let's say, hey, I'm a HubSpot correspondent, and uh, if I can solve a problem simply by giving you a link to the product update, I don't necessarily know how to build that thing.
Yep.
I don't need to know your strategy. I just, like, you tell me what the problem is. I am aware that this product update exists that uses 80% of the words that you just used to me, and the problem solved. And that's the part without creating this space to say that these roles are important. You just never get there, right? And we always try to say, okay, well, we'll just add that correspondent hat, or that, like, the person who likes to be on LinkedIn the most is just going to start sharing product updates. But then as soon as the workload gets serious, they stop sharing product updates,
Yeah.
right? So the, so if you could humor me, like those three words, like craftsman, coach, correspondent, like, is there?
Is this just like roles within the HubSpot ecosystem you're trying to bucket?
I think so. I think to get to the goal of, like, okay, if somebody says they're a craftsman, and of course, this is not just in a vacuum. I'm not just going to throw these words out there and not provide stories and narratives and connect them to things people are doing, right? Anything we decide to do is going to require education and conversation about how this applies to the real world, right? But getting to the point where we know that there are builders and technicians and developers and that group that would just love to just be in HubSpot all day long. They don't really love talking to people necessarily, but they can build some really cool shit. Uh, and they don't necessarily want to mess around with your strategy. They don't want to be a part of the deep dive discovery call. Like, just tell me what to build and let's get to it, right?
Okay.
Like finding a word to describe those engineers, developers, technicians, right? Without pissing people off. Like, I'm not just a technician. Like, that's like low, right? But that is a clear separation from the other two for me, right? Then coaches as people that can step back and say, like, and help people find the solutions, ask the right questions, right? I'm not building, that's me, right? I don't want to build anything for anybody, right? Because I believe the best HubSpot is the one that you manage and maintain yourself. Um, and my job as a coach is to help you understand your own strategy and your own goals and your own business relationship with this best platform ever put in front of you. So there's distinction for me, but the end goal is, could we get to a place where, okay, I know that's a hub, like, I see HubSpot coach, I know that person's not building anything for me and I need something built.
What does a
So
coach
I
do then?
know
Just train other people in
it can be
this?
training, it can be like, if, like, a more classic term, maybe strategists would go in that bucket. like consultants. I think a huge problem is that we use phrases like technical consultant,
Yeah.
and those are people that are supposed to be able to build out solutions like a lot. And, you know, I think traditionally consulting, right, is trying to get to the heart of the problem, not necessarily building solutions.
But it's
Um,
still needed. So
but
yeah, coach, consultant, that's the C. I was going to say there's either a fourth term. The most, this is going to sting, but the most, I would say the most powerful and the most influential and the most important people in the ecosystem, in HubSpot's ecosystem, are A, not here yet, or B, like the founders of HubSpot. We need a migration in, because what's missing is, I use sports analogies a lot. Yeah, and you live in Houston apparently. Jerry World, right? The big AT&T Stadium. You had a bunch of builders. You literally have coaches there, and you have to your other point, not consultants but correspondents. And somehow they still couldn't figure out that, if we build this in this orientation, whenever we play games in the afternoon, our receivers, if we're going towards the west end of the stadium or whatever, are going to be blinded. So you needed somebody with a larger holistic understanding to I'm not going to say consult, to advise, whatever you want me to say there. But it's like, okay, we'll reorient the stadium like this, right? And then you set to building, but it's late December when you start, like, not a good time to start either. So the having been myself been born in the ecosystem, I guess, or like my career started here, I don't have expertise outside. The most influential people we've already kind of mentioned earlier, it's people that are external. And that to me is where all of those things hinge, is like, whenever you're asking, I don't care, I just want to build this. Why are you building it? When should you build it? What should you build first? How should it be built? That requires a deeper holistic understanding, almost, I would say, completely outside of HubSpot, agnostic to HubSpot or the tool. So when people ask us, like, have you ever done have you ever set up a website, have you ever built anything for an insurance company or a medical firm or any of that? It's like, sure. What's your data model? What's your go to market motion? What's your sales motion? Is it one stage, two stage? Is it PLG? Is it e-commerce? That matters a lot more for the data architecture and integrity within your CRM. And that doesn't require necessarily an understanding of each industry, but it requires a generalist, like holistic, thorough knowledge of data architecture and how to set that up. So that's the buckets. Like, that's also what RevOps can help solve for, is like, not just building it and not just coaching. You use the coach as like the person who would give strategic advice of like when, how, where, what to do first, like priorities. So I would agree with that. And then you have correspondent that can just get people in and out. Like, the more, I'm not sure, but I'll figure it out. Or here's this thing, like quick response, all of that, super useful, super low lift on their part. That may not be a strategist or a builder. But if you're, I could give infinite examples of that. It's like, of course we can build it. Should you? Yeah, you should. Okay, when? There's elements of that need to be rounded up, and they need to have a common thread of like, well, just fundamentally, we're not going to do that ever, because it doesn't make sense with how we're going to market. It doesn't make sense with our, like, how our sales motion is. And it's the knowledge to know, all right, well, we just laid off our entire SDR. Like, all right, we're not going to have this anymore. We're not two stage. We're not going to do outbound as much. It's not working as much. We're going to eliminate this function, change data architecture and structure and how we sell or how we go to market into one stage, or even now, actually, we're going to introduce a subscription service that we have because we think it's a good idea. We have some data points on it. How would we build that out? Oh, okay. Well, this is how you need to set that up. We agree this makes sense. I would give it until June, right? That's when you need to start doing it because of other market factors. So just the concept of somebody only living within the HubSpot ecosystem, to me, is unfortunately kind of the biggest problem. It gives you a very clear understanding of the ecosystem, and it gives you incredible access, insight as to the problems here. but it doesn't leverage you as somebody to advise anyone like as well as you could outside of the ecosystem and bring them in as a client, as a user, convert them to an evangelist. So you have to have that understanding that's like whether it's HubSpot, Dynamics, Monday.com, or a spreadsheet, you have to have like what does the data architecture need to be to create the most efficient process to create the best results, all of that. And it's agnostic, that's in a sense to the tool. We've just so why HubSpot? Well, it is the best option for us. We're experts at this. Here's why. Like that to me becomes the new approach. It's just hard to lead with that because there is confusion. So everything you said, even starting off, like we got a problem in the ecosystem. I think some of what I just said is like how to start thinking about addressing it. Is like expanding the ecosystem and expanding like almost the dual nature of people within it, right? Like, yes, I love
Yeah.
Sprocketeer and I'm in the HubSpot ecosystem and I come to these hugs, but I also live at Salesforce Bend to see what they're doing, and also follow Winning by Design and Jocko and have read their revenue architecture books because I want to be as well versed and knowledgeable, regardless of like tool or affiliation. And so whenever you have that level of understanding and depth of experience, it's people will be like, oh shit, okay, what would you use? HubSpot. Here's why. It addresses like then you have the credence to be able to say things like that and make recommendations.
Right. Without the need to have built anything
Yep.
yourself. Correct?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like all of these words that we showed at the beginning. Like they put all these words together, like like solutions architect, um, like implementation architect. Like I think that's the key. Like and it's maybe it's different words. It probably is different words, but the key is like, okay, are you in? Do you want to, or are you most valuable doing stuff in the platform, building stuff, putting stuff together, break fix? Um, are you a strategy mind? Like basically the architects, the um, strategists, the people who ask the questions. Uh, you know, for me, I think like it's hard for me because the questions and answers very quickly turn into strategy and you know direction. Um, and I think the main difference between coach and consultant is coach helps you figure out the problem together, where consultant is somebody who just gives you the solution after understanding what the problems are. Um, and but then this third one, like that person you just mentioned, and maybe I think the grayest area for me is like who can do the training. I think it's either of the non builders. And this is more from a perspective that it's not that builders can't do the training, but if they're always in platform, they're always building stuff, it's very hard for them to get the well-rounded knowledge to to have the communication capabilities to train on all these different levels we know need to be trained. But that knowledge, that awareness, that highest level of awareness of this is what's going on in HubSpot and this is how it relates to everything else that we're seeing, it's very hard to do the applied strategy of HubSpot and also reach that level of awareness. So it's a like you say, I think it we need to bring in things from the outside of the ecosystem that have not existed in the ecosystem before. And let's not look to an ecosystem that has the exact same problems.
Yeah.
Uh, that's called Salesforce. Uh, and let's not try to just say, oh, what does a Salesforce admin do over there? All right, let's start doing that over here. I think that is a huge trap. And so I mean, those analogies are real that you brought up, and there's lots of value outside of the ecosystem. And I think we saw that in the early days of content, right? Like some of the smartest people doing content uh, were hiring journalists, like that had nothing to do with their space, right? They had the skill set to tell stories, and it was a real fresh perspective, and you could tell when it was happening. We need more of that. We need more, fresh perspective uh, inside of this ecosystem right now. Um, so
I agree so much so that I'm trying to find a comment that I think helps to illustrate the difference, and I can't find it yet. I know I'm going to find it.
and Matthew says, "I'm sorry if this is like, feel like LinkedIn is like 7 minutes behind us." So um, it's almost like you need a HubSpot advocate that plays devil advocate,
Yeah,
basically, because you know what's going on outside the ecosystem, right? It's very hard to do that without knowing what's going on outside of the ecosystem.
here it is. Somebody said something, HubSpot or Salesforce. I get asked this question a bunch, yada, yada, right? I responded. And I think it's appropriate here and probably a good place to stop because I know it's 9:57. Salesforce is Marble, HubSpot is Canvas. The art in the data science comes from the user and their choice of medium. Marble, Salesforce, is great if you can work with it. Requires a ton of experience and training. Takes longer time to value, but it ends up being, it's a medium. Canvas, HubSpot, is also great. I would say it's easier for anyone to learn how to paint or draw than it is for somebody to learn how to sculpt. And to me, that's like a decent illustration of the difference. But it also points to the fact that if you're an artist or if you're Michelangelo or whatever, then it's really about preference. And so, like, what's the easiest way to scale? Is it marble? Is it canvas? Like, which one's easier for the user adoption? And so, if you want to think about it, like, to me, it is art. It's art and science. It's both. And so, if you want to think about it in terms of like ease of use, to me, that's a good analogy. But it doesn't mean that a canvas painter, whatever expert, or a canvas company is going to be seen as the expert for art. Does that make sense? Like, who cares where you get the type of canvas or the type of stone as much as like the end result and output? So there's a need for both. There's a need for the artist, the tool, and the medium. To me, that feels about like however you interpreted the metaphor, if it was good or bad. It's like somebody that has artistic ability, it's almost irrespective, or it should be irrespective of the medium they choose to write on. I can't draw anything. Doesn't matter if it's a napkin, a canvas, uh, you know, Canva, literally the tool. I can't draw. Like I'm not good with art, but I can recognize when people are, and it makes me think, huh, I could apply that over here. That to me is the parallel a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. We need to get out of our tool based and platform based, um, intense focuses, uh, intense lenses that we apply. The people that know how to scope, the people that know how to build, the people that know how to create strategy, the people that know how to communicate and train. Like it has nothing to do with the tool that they're training on often. Um, so we got to find a way to expand our minds and capabilities, within the ecosystem, while still holding on to what makes us, the HubSpot ecosystem. We're not saying, get rid of this value first and overly focus on skill sets and tactics and theory experience. Uh, so this is awesome, man. I always appreciate these conversations with you. I know this was helpful for some people. It was good to see some engagement in the chat today. We're going to continue this conversation. We're here to help, uh, you know, drive some solutions here, build some more trust in the space.
And invite people
Uh,
into it. I would say first,
yes.
or at least top of the list. Is this is not meant to be exclusive, or hey, we need to leave the ecosystem, which is kind of what I was saying. Not even that, just be in more places for more perspective. So I think people coming in and saying like, you know, this thing y'all been doing over here, here's like a slightly better way to do it, and it worked. We think it would be even more useful with Hub. That to me is like the expansion of the ecosystem includes expansion of everything, experience, perspective, like all of that. It's just going to be more helpful. So y'all come on in. The water's fine.
Yeah. Bring them out. Bring them out. Uh, let's find those opportunities. Look into your network. Who can we bring in? Who has this perspective that we're talking about? Find those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
See ya. It
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
was good. I sent you